Anyhow, okay, so 2 ways to think about the modes. Let's do Lydian first, and then we'll do Dorian too, just to confuse you as much as I can.
Lydian is the fourth.
Yeah, so 2 ways to think about. Let's do Dorian first. 2 ways to think about the modes. The first way, which is what we learned first, is from the generative scale. So this is C major scale. This is a unique collection of whole and half steps. C major scale is a generative scale. It generates 7 different modes because there's 7 notes in the scale. Depending on what note you start on, generates the mode. So if you start on the first note, it's called major, or in mode speak, it's Ionian. If you start on the second note, it generates Dorian. The third note generates Phrygian. The fourth note generates Lydian. The fifth note generates Mixolydian. The sixth note generates Aeolian. Seventh note generates Locrian. So those are 7 modes that are generated by the C major scale, and this works for every other major scales. There's 12 major scales, 1 for each note on the piano.
Gotcha.
Okay, so one way that we can figure out Dorian, for example, say I want to play a D Dorian scale.
I want to play a D Dorian scale.
So, first way that I figure that out is I know that D is the second note of C major, right? So I know that if I play a C major scale starting on the second note, which is D, I know very confidently that this is a D Dorian scale because it looks exactly the same as a C major scale, sorry. Okay. D Dorian is exactly the same as C major, but you're starting on D.
Gotcha.
Okay, the second way to think about this is how do I get a D Dorian, or how do I get a Dorian scale from the major scale? So in other words, if I'm in C and I say, I want to play a C Dorian scale, right? You flat the third and you flat the seventh. And we're going to do this a couple different ways, so follow along. So we have, here's your C major scale. I just know that because I memorized my C major scale. I memorized all my major scales so well so I can think about this other second level stuff. Okay. So I'm flatting the third and I'm flatting the seventh. So this is C Dorian. I know that this is C Dorian, and I figured that out in a different way than the other way. This is the second way to think about it. I take my major scale, which I know for a fact is this. This is my C major scale. I am altering the C major scale to get my Dorian scale. So I have my third note is E, my seventh note is B, so I'm flatting those, and I come up with C Dorian, okay? C Dorian has an E flat and a B flat. Tuck that away in your memory for a second. Now we're going to do another example. We're going to figure out...
That's the Dorian...
Hello!
Sorry.
So, I don't want to get confused.
Right.
So this is important. Now I'm going to figure out the D Dorian scale again using the D major scale. So if I have a D major, I know that my D major scale looks like this because I was good and I memorized all my major scales. So I have D, and my sharps are F sharp and C sharp, right?
Right.
Here's my D major scale. So I want to play a D Dorian scale, and I'm thinking about it in terms of my D major scale. If I take a D major scale and I flat the third, and I flat the seventh, I know that I'm playing a D Dorian scale, okay? So I arrived at this same answer 2 different ways.
So one is going from the C major scale, and one is going from the D major scale.
Exactly.
Okay.
So 2 ways to think about it. If I want to play a D Dorian scale, I know that D is the second note of C major. So if I play my C major scale and I start on the second note, which is D, I know that I'm playing a D Dorian scale. The second way to think about it is if I take my D major scale, I know my D major scale is this, and if I flat the third note and the seventh note, I come up with the exact same answer.
Okay.
It's like 2 plus 2 equals 4, but also 1 plus 3 equals 4. Right? Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so just for the sake of argument, let's figure out why the second way to figure out C Dorian. So C Dorian, first way to think about C Dorian, here's my C major scale, I'm flatting the third and I'm flatting the seventh. And I have C Dorian, right? E flat, B flat. What is C the second note of? C major, C. This is why this is confusing. You get all the terms jumbled in your mouth. But, so, the second way to think about it is if we know what the C is the second note of, and I know, because I know my scales really good, C is the second note of the B flat major scale. So if I know my B flat major scale, which I really do, I know that B flat major looks like this. It has a B flat and an E flat. This is a double B flat, E flat. And if I start this scale on the second note, which is C, I get my C Dorian scale, which also has a B flat and an E flat, right? Those are the only flats.
Right.
So I know this just for a fact. I just know that this is a B flat major scale. And if I start on the second note, which is C, I know that that's going to be a C Dorian scale. That's the generative scale way to figure it out. Now we figure it out. Here's C major. I know this is a C major scale. If I flat the third and if I flat the seventh, I get C Dorian. It's exactly the same scale that I just played.
As B flat.
As B flat major. It's the same scale.
Okay.
Two ways to come up with the same answer.
Okay.
Breathe. Now we have corpse pose. What is it? You ever do yoga?
Really?
Namaste.